Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the California Department of Education's Partnering with Tribes to Support Preschool through Third Grade Alignment webinar. We are very excited to be here with you today. I am Brianne Rude, a program analyst in the Early Education Division at the California Department of Education and one of the presenters for today's webinar. I'm joining you today from Sacramento, California. This specific part of Sacramento that I am located in was and still is the tribal land of the Nisenan people. Sacramento was a gathering place for many local tribes who have lived throughout the Central Valley and the foothills for generations and were the original stewards of this land. I'm honored today to stand on this land of the Nisenan people. We have a few quick logistics to run through before we get started. To open this webinar, if you could please put your name, tribal affiliation and/or program, and identify if you are a part of or work with another organization in the chat feature. This will help us see who is with us today. Also, we will be taking live Q&A as well as comments in the chat feature, so please feel free to use either feature throughout this webinar. Lastly, we will be sending out this slide deck, and it will be available on our website for those who would like a copy of this webinar. I will now hand it over to Paul Tupaz for our opening prayer. Paul?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Paul Tupaz. I'm honored to have been asked to open us with a blessing and a prayer. And right now I'm burning a piece of angelica. It's a root that is gathered and was gifted to me to be shared. And so I'm going to go ahead and stand and just offer a few words. Dear Creator, thank you for life and thank you for all our blessings. I'm grateful for this opportunity for us to have a sharing, a time for us to listen, a time for us to learn with one another and find solutions together. I ask that we all connect with the ancestral land that we're on. I'm grateful to be here at Berry Creek Rancheria, located in Oroville, California, serving the beautiful people of Berry Creek. I ask that each and every one of us feel love and passion to serve those that depend on us, that need us, and for us to bring out the best in ourselves, for us to bring out the best in one another, and for us to generate goodness for those children and families that really deserve and require our best attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul. Although the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond, could not be live with us today, he wanted to share a few words and a welcome note with everyone.
Hey everybody, Tony Thurmond here, California State Superintendent of Public Instruction. I have the honor of working with our 10,000 schools in the state, and today bringing you greetings and welcome for the next installment in our pre-kindergarten to third grade webinar series. Today, we're focused on strengthening our partnership in serving Native American students and our partnership with the tribal sovereign nations that exist in the state of California. We enjoy great partnership. I'm coming to you from the land of the Tongva people and happy to provide you greetings on behalf of the California Department of Education. This year, we've worked very hard on ways to support more learning and support about the contributions of Native American people. I'm very proud to have sponsored AB 1703, a bill by Assemblymember James Ramos that is squarely focused on making sure that what we teach about Native American history is culturally competent, is historically accurate, and gives all California students a chance to learn about the history and the contributions of Native American people in California. As you also know, we are working to implement an ethnic studies graduation requirement. And in ethnic studies, our students will have the chance to learn about Native American history and the contributions of the Native American people to make California a great state. We look forward to having these conversations and building off of the great work that's being done to provide early education for students throughout our state. We're working on universal meals, making sure our students learn to read by third grade. And it is very important to me that we work together to find ways to increase the graduation rate and to lower chronic absenteeism in our Native American communities. This is important for all of our communities, but I'm especially focused on the work that we can do together as we support our partners in the Native American community. And we hope that you'll reach back to us and find ways to work with us through our American Indian Education Oversight Committee, which gives us a way to work with Native American leaders on various topics in education, on how we support after-school programming, how we provide more tutoring and supports to students in our state, but we can use that oversight committee to address any issue in how we partner with Native American communities. So thank you for being here today. Enjoy the webinar, and we look forward to our great work together in support of our Native American communities and students, and on behalf of 6 million students in the great state of California.
I will now hand over the presentation to our Deputy Superintendent, Sarah Neville Morgan. Sarah?
Thanks so much, Bree. Good afternoon, all, and thank you so much for joining us today for the Partnering with Tribes to Support Pre-K through Third Grade Alignment webinar. My name is Sarah Neville Morgan, and I'm the Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction for the Opportunities for All branch, or OFAB, at the California Department of Education, or CDE. I would like to welcome you on behalf of CDE and on behalf of the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond, whom you just heard from. We're really happy to have you join us today for our 11th edition of the OFAB Pre-K to Third Grade webinar series. I am joining you today from San Diego, California, on Coronado Island, the Viejas Reservation. This is Kumeyaay land. The Kumeyaay Nation extends from San Diego and Imperial counties in California to 60 miles south of the Mexican border. The Kumeyaay are members of the Yuman tribe language branch of the Hokan group. I am grateful today to honor the Kumeyaay tribe and their land. And now I would like to introduce Dr. Nikki Sandoval, Director of the Western Educational Equity Assistance Center at WestEd. Nikki partners with tribal, federal, state, and local education agencies to advance equity for all students by aligning their education policies, strategies, and accountability practices to achieve more equitable outcomes for students. She served as the education director for the Santa Ynez Band of Chumash Indians and the assistant director for community services at Smithsonian's National Museum of the American Indian. I would also like to introduce Stephanie Myers. Stephanie is a Klamath tribal member and the director of the California Head Start Collaboration Office at the California Department of Social Services. You heard earlier from Bree, and we'll hear a bit more from her. And today, also from the California Department of Education, we have Judy Delgado. Judy is from the Susanville Indian Rancheria and is an American Indian education consultant with CDE. There are 109 federally recognized tribes in California. Two of the largest metropolitan areas for American Indian populations in California are the Los Angeles, Long Beach, Anaheim, and the Riverside, San Bernardino, Ontario. In addition, there are about 45 tribal communities of formerly recognized tribes that were terminated as part of the United States termination policy in the 1950s, or tribal communities that were never recognized by the federal government. Tribes today continue to work to attain federal recognition. It is important to mention that California is home to Native people whose origins are with tribes outside of the state as well as inside. This adds to the complexity of consultation and engagement with tribal leaders who are out of state, but it is not impossible. Each tribe has its own ceremonial, cultural, economic, educational, governance, and social practices. Federally recognized tribes are sovereign nations with the right to make their own laws and govern themselves. We will mention this several times today, as it is that important context to always keep at the forefront in our partnerships between early ed, PK-12 programs in schools, and tribes. Respect for them as sovereign nations. I will now hand it over to Nikki.
Kakinalan, Sarah, thank you. I'm grateful to you. Haku Maktuka Nikki, Kascholiti Nono. Hi, I'm Nikki. I'm really happy to see you today. And I'd like, before we get started, I'd like you to meet my grandmothers, my great-grandmothers, Margarita Bernal and Rosa Cota. They survived the mission system and its devastation. And I'm joining you today from Lompoc, California, in Santa Barbara County, now known as Lompoc, the city of Lompoc. This is Chumash land on California's central coast, and I am grateful every day that I live and work on our ancestral lands, near relatives who are survivors, who are still here. Acknowledging our ancestors and our lands is a very simple way to honor our first peoples. Remember the history of the places where we gather, and to begin to address the invisibility that we may feel in our learning environments. This is a practice that fosters respect. It's really important to understand and remember that colonial settlers were not the first peoples here in California. Places had names, and sometimes you can see the inspiration of the first names in the place names that we know today. And every person who's gathered here today is joining from the ancestral lands of Indigenous peoples. I invite you to pause for a moment. We are stepping into this space together from very busy lives and busy days. So I invite you to just take a breath. Think about the land where you stand or you sit today. Remember the people who lived, who loved, who cared for their children here. That is why we're here too today, for our children. So thank you for joining us. In the next slide, I'm going to share as the team cues up the video. This is a video that's produced by the Native Governance Center and the Minnesota Humanities Center. And it defines tribal sovereignty, which is the right for tribes to make their own laws and to govern themselves. And this is a key understanding for working respectfully with Indigenous students, families, and the Native nations that they are affiliated with. It's only 2 minutes long, 2 minutes, and it describes the concept of tribal sovereignty beautifully. So if you could please cue up the video.
Tribal sovereignty. It's a phrase you've likely heard before, but what does it really mean? Sovereignty is the natural right of a people to govern themselves. Sovereignty means that tribes operate as independent nations within a nation. And did you know that there are 574 federally recognized Native nations in the United States? All of these tribes have their own constitutions, laws, elections, and infrastructure designed to meet their people's needs. Their rights, lands, assets, and resources are their own. This is similar to how the United States government exercises sovereignty on behalf of its citizens. Tribal nations have been sovereign since time immemorial. Sovereignty is not granted, but rather it is recognized. The federal government recognizes tribe sovereignty through treaties. In order to make a treaty, two sovereign nations must come together, recognize each other's right to govern their own people, and create an agreement. With or without the United States, tribal nations are sovereign. But if you need more proof, the United States Constitution, in addition to hundreds of treaties and Supreme Court cases, has repeatedly affirmed tribes' right to govern themselves. Remember, tribal nations have always been and will always be sovereign. Treaties are the supreme law of the land. The United States government's frequent violations of its treaty obligations do not change that. Now that we understand what sovereignty is, why is sovereignty important? Sovereignty matters because sovereign nations know best what their people need. Tribal governments make vital decisions for their people related to healthcare, education, and economic development, among others. When Native nations make their own decisions, they are more likely to thrive. Strong, sovereign tribal governments fosters strong tribal economies and nations. We honor and affirm tribal sovereignty. To learn more about why sovereignty matters, visit nativegov.org or treatiesmatter.org.
Thank you. Thank you. Two takeaways from that clip. Sovereign nations know best what their people need. And when Native nations make their own decisions, they're more likely to thrive. And this is relevant because this concept extends to education. By engaging family and community members in our work with students at the center, our young people are more likely to thrive. If we could advance to the next slide, please. This image is from an infographic that we developed in partnership with the Regional Educational Laboratory West at REL West. And the title of the resource, which we will actually share a link in the chat so you can access this resource, is titled Working Respectfully with Indigenous Communities Around Data and Evidence, a resource for state education agencies. It is also relevant to you in your work because these are 6 principles for you to consider in applying to your work with Indigenous communities. And I'll just briefly state what these are, and you can read more about them in the resource. The first is to develop your Indigenous literacy. Learn more about the communities that you're working with. Second, reflect on what you and your agency or entity bring to the relationship. Third, invest in mutually beneficial and reciprocal relationships. So working is a reciprocity, it's an exchange, and it's ongoing work. Honor Indigenous community sovereignty, unique political status, protocols, and ways of being. It's really important to understand the diverse Native nations that are represented in our schools and in our learning communities. Recognize and integrate Indigenous expertise. We have knowledge bearers and resources in so many different areas, and we're ready to work in partnership with you. And then partner with tribal communities to inform system improvements. And what that means is that we can always do better in all of our work. And by engaging in partnerships, we can really work together to co-design those improvements so they're more effective. So engaging with community members is ongoing work. And I want to thank you for being here and for all that you do to support our youth and families. Next, I'd like to invite Sarah.
Thank you so much, Nikki, for helping us understand the history and the sovereignty of the governance for tribes, as well as sharing the 6 principles to consider when working with Indigenous communities. Now I wish to share our framework for transforming California's schools. The 2022-23 California budget will almost triple the amount of per pupil investment from a decade ago, providing us with the resources and the opportunity to address the historical inequities, learning loss, and the social emotional needs of all students, while supporting families, educators, and local educational agencies and partners. We at the CDE, and under the leadership of State Superintendent Tony Thurmond, are leading the effort to transform California schools by integrating new programs and strategies into our TK to 12 public schools. California's historic budget investments that were launched in 2021-22 and now expanded in our current budget provide a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to truly transform California's educational landscape with historic new and expanded investments in education, including universal pre-K investments, meals, nearly universal expanded learning opportunities, community schools, teachers prep, and special education. We are really excited about the interconnected nature of these investments and the opportunity to leverage them to create a coherent pre-K to 3rd grade system, as well as creating the educational system California students and families need in 2020 and beyond, not the system from 1950 or even from 2019. This historic universal approach to education is an opportunity for California to rethink or reimagine our educational system as one that brings equity to all children and families, and also provides great opportunities for teachers and those interested in becoming teachers, including people from our tribes. California is home to the nation's largest multilingual student population, and according to trust lands or tribal designated statistical areas, California is second with 100 of 107 of our U.S. tribal areas. In our efforts to ensure California is taking the right steps around embracing and incorporating languages and cultures into our programs and schools, it is necessary to ensure we're not only meeting the goal of the California Master Plan for Early Learning and Care, but we're also supporting the communities and families we serve, which includes our tribal government. UPK, our Universal Preschool, and P3 opportunities can bridge the culturally grounded work being done by tribes and co-create ways to work together to better serve American Indian students, inclusive of culturally relevant education and language-based approaches to literacy. A P3 frame can help ensure that pre-K and the early elementary years are culturally and linguistically responsive and support multilingualism, including Native American languages. Together in California, we are transforming our education system to meet the needs of all children and set them up for success in learning and life. This holistic approach to education is our opportunity to rethink and reimagine and ensure we're reshaping it to meet the needs of all families and children. We recognize these long-awaited opportunities are coupled with persistent challenges, and we have much needed work on capacity building and deeper equity efforts. In addition, I would also be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that there are bright spots across California as we move in the right direction. Governor Newsom signed AB 1703 and 4 other tribal bills in September of 2022. In the governor's own words, he said, and I quote, "As we lift up the rich history and contributions of California's diverse tribal communities today, the state recommits to building on the strides we have made to redress historical wrongs and help empower Native communities." There is no question the investments we choose at this moment must help our schools urgently and immediately recover from COVID-19 pandemic, as well as address long-standing disparities of income, race, and language access. The disproportionate impact of the pandemic on tribal communities, communities of color, and low-income communities has been a harsh reminder of systemic problems we must resolve in order to move forward together. These investments create an opportunity to rebuild and co-create something different, something better, the potential for genuine transformation and partnerships. UPK is the foundation of our efforts to achieve our collective goals. For too long, California's early learning and care and TK-12 systems have worked independently. UPK is our opportunity to bring these systems together to work better for children and families. The current graphic shows the bridging of the early learning and care system with Tribal Head Start, Tribal Child Care, and our state preschool program and others, with the TK-12 system and our American Indian Education Center. As we move forward with these exciting and historic changes to implement California's UPK program, our goal is to create strong connections between TK-12 and tribal communities, local communities, and other early learning and care programs. UPK creates a bridge between the early learning and care system and TK-12, a long-awaited and much-needed bridge. UPK can serve as this bridge between early childhood and TK-12 systems to increase students' readiness for school and schools' readiness for children and students so that all children thrive in school and in life. In focusing on strengthening the pre-K to third grade system, we are ensuring that any following efforts or investments made from those investments in infant toddlers or in pre-K are sustained and not lost. This ensures the TK-12 system is building off of children's inherent potential, as well as promoting the message that elementary schools can and should and must learn from preschool settings, so that the K, first, and second grade classrooms can be more nurturing, joyful, and developmentally and culturally appropriate environments for young children. On this graph, you'll see that developmental growth and thriving in tribal families and communities in our early learning and care system and tribal Head Start, tribal childcare, state preschool, and you see that bridge across and over into our TK-12 system with those American Indian education centers and successful transitions to welcoming and supportive schools, a strong foundational skills for students with culturally affirming climates in the schools, and college and career success in the workforce, in tribal colleges, universities, and other higher education institutions. Throughout today's webinar, we are leaning in collectively to build a bridge with our tribal families and communities, to acknowledge that historic traumatic harm caused by prior federal and state agencies, to acknowledge we still make mistakes and need to learn more and change what we do in order to be genuine partners who support cultures of belonging, healing, and thriving. We ask you all to join us in the learner's stance and listen openly for ways we can improve and how to grow the bright spots. How the educational community can work with tribes to ensure our children and students have not just a sense of belonging in the school community, but also maintain and grow their sense of pride in being American Indian. Our ultimate vision is for all children to have a strong and early start to inclusive education through high quality, joyful, rigorous, developmentally informed, and coherent pre-K through third grade learning opportunities to ensure they thrive in school and life and are college and career ready. Through this vision, our collective vision, our path is to work together to build and support culturally affirming schools and teachers as they work, volunteer, and engage in California's educational system and beyond. Our history shows that we have a lot of work to do, and that's why we're all here today, to learn, celebrate, and uplift Indigenous cultural teachings. Together we can and we will work towards a strong foundation for our children. I will now pass over the next section over to Judy. Judy?
Thank you, Sarah. We had invited Dr. Rhonda Welch-Salco to be on the panel, but her schedule did not permit. She did send me some slides introducing the Barona Preschool and some words for me to share with you. First, I'd like to give you a little background on Rhonda. She is an enrolled member with the Barona Band of Mission Indians and a former chairwoman of the tribe. She's a full-time faculty at MiraCosta College. Her educational background is in child development, early childhood special education, risk and resilience. She is passionate about early childhood education and supporting tribal children who have special learning needs to help them achieve their educational goals. Rhonda has authored 2 infant board books, Ilimash Shimap and Sin Hiwak Himuk in her native language, in addition to starting a chapter of Reach Out and Read at the Southern Indian Health Council. So the benefits of the Barona Preschool, our preschool prepares our young scholars to be proud of who they are and where they come from. Every child who graduates from our program knows about their culture, heritage, and some of the language. The curriculum in our tribal preschool prepares our children for school readiness, but more importantly, it fosters a strong sense of identity in our little ones. The activities throughout the day underscore the importance of storytelling and learning about our belief system and the cultural ways of knowing. On the slide, you'll see the grinding rock used for acorn preparation. Acorns were a staple in our diets. The children are able to visit the rocks and put their hands in the holes and feel the bright vibrations of their ancestors. A lot of discussion occurs during circle time, and the content sometimes coincide with what's currently occurring on the reservation, be that a death, a candle lighting day, or a gathering. The children see our teachers as part of the community because they are welcomed and participate in these events. Every teacher is aware of our tribal history and understands the difficulties our children face within the public school system. They do everything in their power to foster a sense of pride in our children that will equip them to deal with the microaggressions they will face once they enter the public school system. On this side, there's a lovely quote by Joy Harjo. Pay attention to who you are and how you're connected to the world around you. And I know you can't see it, but the Kumeyaay words, they're right underneath the colored monsters that are on the cabinets. The children learn their colors in both Kumeyaay and English. The curriculum at the Verona Preschool builds on lived experiences that being American Indian is the norm and not the unusual. The elders come into the classroom and help our children make shewi and fry bread. They also read books in our native language. Boys with long hair are not questioned or ridiculed as customary. Bird singers also visit and help children make music from the halmas. Our children do gardening projects and grow native plants like elderberry and sage, and learn about the healing properties and how they were used by our people. All of these activities are place-based and part of our tribe. Encouraging our Native children to attend preschool in a public classroom would negatively influence their self-identity, self-esteem, and self-concept. The teachers in UPK will not look like our children, nor will they understand the cultural significance behind the things we do, such as standing when the bird singers sing or why we smudge. The cards are already stacked against our precious little ones at 5 years of age. Why would we want the process to begin earlier? I would like to thank Rhonda for sharing her thoughts on the Verona Preschool program. Okay, thank you. There's a lot that can be learned on how to create programs that are welcoming and culturally affirming to Native American children by listening to those who have already created successful programs. As we begin to look at how to work with tribal communities, partnering with successful programs like Verona Preschool is crucial. And on the slide is Rhonda's contact information. And if you're interested in learning more about the Verona Preschool, I encourage you to contact her. And now I will turn it over to Stephanie and Bree.
Thank you so much, Judy. A few ways the CDE has engaged and committed to working with tribes are through the American Indian Early Childhood Education Grant and the Tribal Child Care Association of California. The American Indian Early Childhood Education Grant, or the AIEC grant, is a program that began in the 1970s. It is designed to develop and test educational models that increase competency in reading, language arts, mathematics, and self-esteem for American Indian children in pre-kindergarten through grade 4. This grant is funded through the Early Education Division at the California Department of Education and is currently serving 12 tribes in California. I will add the link into the chat now for you all. In addition, the Tribal Child Care Association of California, or TCCAC, is comprised of individuals who work for tribal lead agencies or grantees administering the Tribal Child Care Development Block Grant and or other tribal child development programs. The TCCAC has joined together to provide professional support and technical assistance to tribes with childcare programs and to unify tribal voices to educate tribal, federal, state, and local governments and agencies, as well as strengthen existence of tribal childcare programs. The link to their website I will be putting into the chat now. The CDE continues to work towards more, the CDE partners and collaborates with the TCCAC through ongoing efforts that connect CDE funding and programming to tribes and tribal communities. Some examples of that include the Preschool through 3rd Grade Initiative, which includes Universal Pre-Kindergarten and California State Preschool programs. The CDE continues to work towards more co-collaboration with and for tribal children and their families in California. Now I will hand it over to Stephanie from the California Department of Social Services to discuss their partnership with TCCAC. Stephanie?
Thanks so much, Bree. The California Department of Social Services, the Child Care Development Division, also partners with the Tribal Child Care Association of California, which Bree just mentioned. As the CCDD is new department to the Department of Social Services, Most of the information and meetings currently are focused on general childcare, which is also known as CCTR funding, quarterly meetings they have together, and state funding opportunities through DSS. The Child Care Development Division and TCCAC meet monthly to collaborate on various input from tribal communities and tribal programs. And I will share their link in the chat in a moment. Head Start is also at the Department of Social Services in the form of the Head Start State Collaboration Office, which is where I work. It is a liaison for Head Start recipients, including children and families that Head Start serves. The California Head Start State Collaboration Office also works with the National American Indian Alaska Native Collaboration Director to support Head Start programs for ongoing coordination and engagement. And I will also put that link in the chat for your information. In addition, at the Department of Social Services is the Office of Tribal Affairs, or also OTA. It has the primary responsibility of building better government to government relationships. And more specifically, the OTA is focused on enhancing the well-being of American Indian children and families through their core values of respect for tribal sovereignty, which you heard about earlier, building core values around integrity, transparency, and being solution focused. And I'll also share that link in the chat as well. And now I'd like to hand it over to my colleague and friend, Judy. Next slide, please.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. So I want to go over some recent legislation. AB 167 is funding allocated to support the development of Native American Studies model curriculum. The San Diego County Office of Education and the Humboldt County Office of Education have been selected as lead agencies in the development of the NASMC. This model curriculum will be designed in partnership with California tribes, other COEs, and Native youth serving organizations. This curriculum is a statewide partnership effort funded through the California Department of Education. And the second piece of legislation the superintendent spoke about also during his remarks was AB 1703, Assemblymember Ramos's bill, and it's entitled the California Indian Education Act. This act encourages LEAs to form California Indian Education task forces with local Indian tribes or tribes historically located in their regions to develop curriculum and submit those curricular materials to San Diego County Office of Ed or Humboldt County Office of Ed to identify strategies necessary to close the achievement gap between Native American students and other students, and then to submit annual reports talking about the progress in closing those achievement grants. The CDE shall also submit a report to the Senate Education Committee and the Assembly Committee on Education. Okay. All right, so now we're moving into the bulk of the webinar, and we will hear from our panelists. They will speak about the opportunity for California to rethink and reimagine our educational system, to look at best practices and how challenging this work can be. But by working together and building strong partnerships, we can be successful in creating programs where Native American students and all students can thrive. We want to make sure that voices are heard, respected, and understood. We don't want to censor people's stories or experience, but use those stories and experiences to build successful programs that benefit our Native American students, their families, and the communities. We have a fantastic panel this afternoon, and I'm going to briefly introduce the panel, and then we'll get right into them answering the questions. So first we have Season Goodpasture. Season is Maidu and Paiute and a member of the Susanville Indian Rancheria in Northern California. She is a marriage and family therapist and the founder of Acorns to Oak Trees. Season's husband, James Goodpasture, is Cupeño, and he and their 4 children are members of the Paula Band of Mission Indians in Southern California. Season's passion has been to serve tribal families and communities through infrastructure, capacity building, and programmatic development in the areas of child welfare, education, mental health, and tribal court. Prior to founding Acorns to Oak Trees, Susan served as the Director of Social Services for the Paula Band of Mission Indians for almost 10 years. Through her work at Paula, Susan developed an extensive social services program, a tribal foster care program, a child support program, a mental health and equine program, a tobacco cessation program, and a comprehensive early intervention program. While at Paula, Susan substantially increased Paula's tribal court infrastructure and capacity, and through this work, Paula was the first tribe in California to be able to conduct their own criminal background checks and ultimately paved the way for all tribes to do so through the passing of SB 1460. Acorns to Oak Trees was inspired by Susan and James's oldest daughter, Harley, who has autism spectrum disorder. Having lived and worked in Indian country for so many years, Susan realized that there were many services, access, and equity barriers that existed for tribal families with special needs, primarily due to the lack of awareness and the huge disconnect between most regional centers and tribal communities. After learning about the high number of tribal children who are diagnosed every year with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and knowing the difficulties she faced when navigating the system, Susan knew something must be done to help tribal communities. I'm really grateful and thank Susan to be able to join us.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce Fawn Rave. Fawn is the descendant of Robinson Rancheria of Pomo Indians of California and Ho-Chunk. She is the mother of 3 beautiful children and 2 grandchildren. Fawn was raised on the Robinson Rancheria and graduated from Upper Lake High School. She is currently the education director for Robinson Rancheria, overseeing after-school and summer programs, childcare, and higher education assistance. Fawn also works with communities for tribal events and cultural teachings. Fawn is on her second term as a Lake County First Five Commissioner. Fawn has worked closely with the school districts to ensure tribal youth are receiving the education they deserve and that Native families have a voice in their children's education. She has been working with other local tribal representatives and the Lake County Office of Education to build curriculum so that the story of the 7 Pomo tribes in Lake County is taught. She has been coaching JV volleyball and middle school girls basketball at Upper Lake School District for the past 5 years. And she sent us in a beautiful quote. It says, "Being a voice for our community and ensuring our youth have a healthy future is important. For too long, our communities have felt forgotten or unwanted. I'm very blessed to be part of the changes happening in our school district and communities." And so I'd like to thank you, Fawn, for being able to join us. And finally, I'd like to introduce Paul Tupaz. Paul is affiliated with the Calaveras Band of Miwok and the Washoe tribes of California and Nevada through marriage, children, and traditional instruction. Paul has a master's degree in business administration and over 25 years of experience working within tribal communities. He is currently serving as the wellness director for the Berry Creek Rancheria of Maidu Indians of California. After graduating from UC Davis with a BA in Native American Studies, Paul served as director of student services and later the director of recruitment and school relations at DQ University. He has been an administrator for Early Head Start, and Migrant Head Start programs. He was a tribal administrator for the Buena Vista Rancheria, supporting the establishment of the Tribal Child Development Center. Paul was a cultural competency program director and later the victim service manager for the Intertribal Council of California. He was a lead general session facilitator of a cultural competency training entitled Strengthening Relationships with Tribal Communities. He has presented at various women's, men's, and youth health and wellness gatherings. Paul serves on the board as treasurer of the Tribal Child Care Association of California and is a member of the Child Care Planning Council of Yuba and Sutter counties. Paul holds a 40-hour tribal domestic violence certification. The areas of specialty for Paul are the impacts of trauma and healing and recovery methods. He is a devoted husband to his wife and actively involved father with their children, their 10-year-old son and 7-year-old daughter. Paul is honored to be invited and welcomed as a wellness director serving the beautiful people of Berry Creek Rancheria of Maidu Indians of California. So I'd like to welcome you all. It's wonderful to see all of you. So our goal today is to give you some insight in working with tribes and tribal communities. Prior to the webinar, there was a resource compendium posted, and I hope you all had a chance to look at the resources available. Be assured all panelists' contact information will be made available, and I encourage you to reach out with questions because they are a wealth of information and inspiration. We have prepared a series of questions that I will be asking the panelists, and they will be sharing their insights and their experiences. And the questions are on the board. I'm going to read the question and then get the conversation started. So the first question is, what is your role in the education system from preschool to third grade, or what interactions have you had with the educational systems in your community? And let's start out with Fawn.
Hello, thank you for having me here today. My role with our local education, I work with all 7 districts around our school, but I have a very close relationship with Upper Lake School District that is like a couple minutes up the street. One, I help oversee our NAC, which is our Native American Action Committee. So there we make sure that our families have a voice in our school district and they're being heard. A lot of the time, I just am the voice for them. They'll come to me with their questions, concerns. We work with the school district maintaining Native American clubs at our middle school and high school, and working with our school district to get our local history of our tribes in our school districts and used as curriculum. I think that's kind of it for right now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Paul, would you like to answer the question?
Yes, again, happy to be here. I think you mentioned some of my experience with early childhood development. Being hired here as a wellness director for Berry Creek Rancheria, it was primarily for victim services, but very quickly within weeks, I was helping and leading the tribal child care program. And so I have some years experience and grateful being involved as a board member. I was elected board member this year with the Tribal Child Care Association of California. And I think in this role of child care, it's really important, child development. It's important to understand how important it is when it comes to community development, when it comes to people being able to go to school, to go to work, and for there to be a place of learning. So as part of COVID, opportunities came, I did envision and lead the opportunity of developing an outdoor wellness center. So there's an outdoor wellness center in the process of being developed. It's designed, and we've done that in a year here at Berry Creek. I am also on, and it was mentioned, as a council member of the local child care planning council of Yuba and Sutter, being a very proud father of Dominic, our son, our 10-year-old son who's in 5th grade, and our daughter who's in 2nd grade, Angelica. I've been very involved in their education and their growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Susan.
Hi. So currently my role is helping families connect with their school system if they have any kind of needs related to requesting an IEP advocacy. I've done a lot of work in that arena, specifically as it relates to Acorns to Oak Trees now. Prior to that, we're serving as the Director of Social Services for the Paul Abandoned Mission Indians. A lot of my interaction with the school district, with the education systems, was helping our children that were involved in dependency cases. So they may be placed in an out-of-home placement with relatives. And so working with the teachers, with the schools on if we did have to transfer, or just, kind of being that go-between and making the transition for the child as easy as possible. And then working like if we had to, sometimes we got just educational rights. The department got educational rights. So there were times where the department, myself, had to make decisions when it came to, different services. And so a lot of the work that I did as the director there was for a lot of our foster youth.
Great, thank you for that. So question 2, if you were to elevate one interaction with the educational system or individual education leader, either positive or challenging, what would it be? Paul, let's start with you.
I really like the introduction when we talked about some 6 principles of developing relationships. I think really, reaching out and understanding who are the tribal people and the tribal governments and the tribal resources in your community. I think in terms of actively listening and sharing, really understanding what kind of tribal resources in each, and I'm glad we've talked about sovereignty, but each tribe is unique. There's a unique history. Also, there's a unique infrastructure, unique programs. And for Berry Creek Rancheria, I can say, there is an education director. There's myself, we have staff in terms of how to support children and families. And with some tribal communities, it's robust. It's exceptional. It can be very unique and designed specifically for the tribe and tribal members. And so, recently I had the opportunity to meet a principal. I invited the principal to the office, and he came and we talked, and I was able to share. But I think sharing, being able to have those relationships to draw from is first and foremost in terms of how can we best serve the beautiful children and families that are in our care.
Thank you, Paul. Fawn, what would you like to add to that?
I think it's important that we build the relationship with our communities, making sure, like Paul said, understanding the resources our tribe has. At Upper Lake, we started doing cultural awareness. There's a lot of turnover in our schools. So we might get a good teacher that's, understanding and there and with, meeting with our tribe, meeting with our family, and then they're gone the next year. So we try to continue a cultural awareness for all the staff, from the janitor to the superintendent, just so they have a better understanding of our people, the history our families have with these school districts in Lake County, understanding that our grandmothers are raising our babies, and the history that grandmother has with going to school in this school district. So we hold meetings a lot. Our NAC meetings, we've held them here on our reservation. So that way our teachers and our superintendent and principals, they're coming here, they're seeing where our children are coming from and what they live with and what we deal with day to day, and making sure that the teachers are understanding why the student's not sleeping because there's partying going on every night at their house, or whatever the situation is just taking that time to make sure our school, our staff, everybody is aware and working together to give that family and that child the support that we can.
Thank you, Fawn. Susan.
So touching on kind of what the goal is for that holistic approach, I like that is a goal of the states, because that's what I see is really lacking right now. I know myself and a lot of the other tribal families that I've worked with, we feel like we have to fight tooth and nail to get services for our kids sometimes, specifically for IEPs. A lot of our kids have missed that early intervention window, that 0 to 3 window. A lot of our kids have IDD that hasn't been caught yet. And so what's happening is a lot of these kids who arguably should have received early intervention services and would have greatly benefited from them, they weren't identified through the Child Find system. And then you have this whole slew of kids that are now entering into kindergarten who are really behind from their peers across the board, right? They've got the global delays and you see all the behavioral stuff. And so there's so much catch up to be done. And then even then, sometimes it's not even caught at like the kindergarten age. It's later on in life. And I feel like sometimes we're having to just really have kind of this butting of heads with the school system, trying to get these IEPs done and get our kids access to these services, and having to become really like specialists in these areas ourselves, so we're equipped to advocate for their needs. And so I would really just, love to see that holistic approach really become implemented and look at the child and act in the best interest of the child right off the get-go, whether or not, it's being pushed for by the parent, not waiting, not expecting the parent to be that, great advocate or having to hire an attorney, to go down that road. But, having the educators and the school systems become that safe place where when they get our kids and they see some of those deficits of those areas, that they're quick to, provide those resources, provide those services, and not the minimum. Our kids already kind of have the odds stacked against them for, one reason or another. And so it would be really beneficial to just throw as many services and resources to the families right from the get-go, and not waiting, for the family to push for it themselves. If you know that the child needs it, just be quick to provide it. And also kind of what Paul and Fawn were saying, relationships are very important, particularly with tribal social service departments. So we have a lot of family history for the kiddos. And so like Fawn had mentioned, a lot of our kids have a lot of things going on in the home. And, we have really high ACEs scores. So it's important for the school districts and the tribal social services departments to have great communication. So we're able to work with our kids and our families and create better outcomes.
Thank you. Thank you, Susan. So the next question talks about, can you speak to the complexities and challenges that you've encountered in navigating collaboration or lack thereof with local education leaders and tribal councils? And Paul, I'd like to start with you because I know you've had that successful interaction with the principal that you spoke about, and maybe you could elaborate on that and maybe talk about when that doesn't happen and how you face that too.
Sure, thank you. Well, first, I think most leadership and child development providers are really at a disadvantage. Or at a disadvantage if what you know about tribal people comes from our educational system. I think it's important that we speak the truth. I think it's important that we speak from love, and I think it's important that we can pivot to hope. But if our educational system that generate our leadership isn't truthful and honest and accurate, then it just leaves the skill set just being below what's necessary. And so, I'm saying that because very often there's a disconnect of understanding and there's misinformation. And so it's really important that we're able to lift up what is the truth and what is the true histories, but not only just put things with a past tense verb. What is taking place today? One of the things I'm grateful was one of our son's teachers asked me, and it was off the record, kind of like, we're going to be talking about the Maidu people, where our children were going to school. Is there, can you give me a little hint? And I said, when you mention the importance of acorns being processed, can you make sure it's not just in past tense? Because that practice continues today. It's important that if there's an opportunity to have textures in the classroom, baskets, willow, redbud, to have things that maybe could be gathered and brought into the classroom for it to feel familiar and less sterile. That's helpful. One of the first educational environments we have is the outdoors. But what are people familiar with? And I think it's really important for there to be this connection with the truth of not just, okay, there was a trail of tears, yes, it's horrifying, but it's important to know what has taken place here locally. And unfortunately, educators can't draw upon their own books. So if they're not easily found in books, if it's not easily found at your local library, then reach out to the local tribe and maybe develop the relationship where you can ask and not just expect all the answers, but it takes trust for somebody to be willing to share this really personal information, share the wounds, these open wounds that continue of what's taken place and what continues to be trauma. And when there's a disconnect when it comes to our educational systems, it's systemic trauma. So it's tough when, a child is going to school and hearing about the mission system, and that's completely different from what a great grandmother or great grandfather experienced in terms of the missions or boarding schools. So, I would say that. I also think it's really important that there, and as Susan mentioned, and I think, a navigator. I know in victim services, it's critical that you have appropriate advocate. And so, the role that Fawn has for the beautiful people she serves is she helps, we all help in accompaniment. And it's really necessary for educators, for providers, from teachers to teacher aides to principals, to know who can you go to and ask who from this tribe may be able to help coordinate and support the services necessary for this family. And to listen, what's taking place. What services are you familiar with, and maybe we can work together and have that release of information, that multidisciplinary team with tribal resources. So those are, some things that I would encourage and share. There are, quite a bit of experiences are negative, but I will, it's imperative that we also share that there's positive and there's huge, changes that we're in the process of. And I'm looking down and I see that there's 178 participants right now. And I think, wow, there's a lot of change agents right now. And so, thank you for the opportunity to share.
Thank you, Paul. And Fawn, touching on what you talked about earlier when you said that you sometimes get a good teacher, so things go really well, and then that teacher may leave for whatever reason, and then you have to start again building trust or thinking about how to get the information to the teacher. Can you talk about how you created partnerships with the top of the school, the principals and superintendents and those, how you've done that so that you can maintain some continuity in your partnerships?
Yeah. So the Upper Lake School District, it's been about, COVID threw me off on years here. So I think it's been about 3 years. They reached out and I was kind of new into my position. I had been here and I went to school there. So, it's a very small town here. I graduated from there. I played sports there. So I knew a lot of the staff. There's been teachers there that have been teachers since I was little. That's teaching my daughter now. So I knew and had some relationships there. School board members were teachers when I was going there. So I had a good relationship with a lot of the staff there. That the school reached out and we were having interviews for a new superintendent. And they reached out to myself with Robinson Rancheria and Joy Marks of Habimatul Pomo right up the street from us. And we actually got to sit on the panel for interviewing superintendents. And I felt like that was a really huge step for our tribes. Like they wanted our opinion, our voice in getting someone there. And we actually ended up picking the gentleman, Dr. Anus, who I felt would do well with our Native communities. And Joy with her tribe felt the same too. And right off the bat, like we sat with him, he wanted to hear our issues, what's been going on. And we had a Native American advisory committee at the time. And we were just going in circles. Nothing was getting done. We were just meeting. It was kind of useless. And then when he came on board, he really just wanted to wanted to learn about our tribes, wanted to learn about our culture and what issues we had. And with having him here has really just opened doors for us building stronger relationships. He had asked if we could change our NAC from advisory to action because we didn't want to just keep advising. We wanted to put things into action. So with that, we got the Native American clubs going. We got the cultural training for all staff going. And there was some teachers that have been there that have just been against it. been against us bringing our culture into the class, been against really understanding and meeting and giving more, not so much giving more chances, but giving that family a chance to explain more what's going on in that household, why they're struggling, why they're not understanding what an IEP is. Our families just think you have that. I'm not going to have my kid get called stupid. They're not understanding how much this will help their child. So with having all these trainings and bringing Dr. Anus, like, we were able to build so many more relationships with our schools, with the principals. Anytime there's anything going on, they will call me and be like, hey, just a heads up, this is what we're dealing with. We may need your help. Our ICWA worker, like, we have everybody at the table and making sure we're all on the same board together and understand what we're going through. We've had teachers that I said, kind of wasn't on board with bringing this culture in, who we did a whole training for 8 weeks for history teachers. And we had one who finally, we thought it would take us the longest, and it really did, but she jumped on board and started her year off with talking about our local tribe's history. Locally, like Paul mentioned, we can't speak of us as past tense. We are here. What happened here in Lake County, we have a school in Kelseyville, California, that was named Kelseyville Indians. Well, Kelsey slaughtered our people, not just our people, my family, and some that if did not hide, I would not be here. So that story has just gotten pushed to the side. We had a whole incident with the school of trying to change. One, we did try to change the town. That's still in the works. But we fought to change the school's name of Indians. They are now Kelseyville Knights. They are no longer the Indians. When we started our curriculum, our one thing we kept getting backlash on is, well, we don't want to be too harsh on, telling the real story. But why? When our family has to live that real story. So it was very surprising when we started our curriculum that the Kelseyville history teachers were there and they were like, we're ready to teach this. I grew up here and I'm ready. Like, that was like awesome. So I think I've been very lucky with my tribe. They support me. Our school district at Upper Lake supports us, and they try to really understand our tribe, how our council runs, how everything is ran, making sure that we can really work well together.
Thank you, Fawn. That's really powerful. When you were talking, I was like, oh, it just makes my heart hurt and sing at the same time. So thank you for sharing all that. Susan, I know that you had a difficulty with the regional center in understanding how that worked when you were working with the Paula tribe. Can you talk about how you kind of bridged that and made those services more known to the tribal community?
Yeah, so that is really how Acorns to Oak Trees came to be. So I have my master's in counseling psychology. I was the director of social services for one of the most high profile tribal programs in the state. But I had no idea what a regional center was. And so when we had Harley, here she was, I saw early signs of autism, and I had that background. So I knew, but I didn't know about this life altering service, right? This free of charge service where they come into your home. I didn't know. I didn't find out until she started physical therapy. So once I understood the regional center, I found out about them, I learned what they did, my whole mindset changed. And I thought of all the families that I had come in contact with, serving as a social services director for Paula. I just thought, gosh, like I should have made so many referrals, and I missed that opportunity because I just didn't know. And so that kind of goes back to that relational piece of how important it is to work on establishing real relationships with your tribal communities, and that goes for the regional center side and, the education side, the school district side. Know the tribes in your area. And having a relationship, like a genuine relationship, is knowing their needs and not just coming, especially in our area where we've got some of the big gaming tribes, not just coming to them for that donation, how can we better serve your children? What are the needs that you're seeing in your community, and how can we work together? I still have not seen that come to fruition, and that's, I think, would be a game changer for all of us. And so I love to hear, Fawn's, experience that's going on for the Robinson Rancheria. That's amazing. I just think that, more collaboration and a true relationship is going to be the key to systematic change.
Thank you. Thank you all. We'll move on to question 4. What aspects of the transition from early childhood providers to the TK-12 system are the most critical from your perspective for supporting tribal children and families specifically? Paul, let's start with you.
Sure, thank you. Well, I think it's unique for each, but I know for Berry Creek Rancheria and a number of folks who prefer the family child care setting, the relative child care services, through a voucher program, that is the most organic, that is the most natural. And then for my wife and I, for our children, we had a lot of choices, but we chose family child care for our children, even though, we could have gone center-based, but it just seems more natural for children, very, very young children. And, I think it's really important to see, one, finding out what has been the experiences of all children and families, and then how do you adjust? How do you have a transition plan? And I remember years ago, there was an incident, a negative incident at one of the universities, and there was a forum, and I showed up with our daughter. She was a baby. And I remember, I did speak, and I said, so often our educational institutions, facilities of any age bracket, is requiring, are your children ready for us? And I think that's the wrong stance. I think education has the resources and should have the expertise and specialists to be ready for those they serve. So I think as educational institutions, we need to make sure that what do we need as a skill set? How much history do we need? How much information do we need to be prepared and ready to serve, those in our care? And then really asking that, those soft questions. Are you used to this? Are you having difficulties with it? What can we do better? And textures, materials, having things that people relate to, books. It's very important for people to be comfortable in order to learn. And if the parents or grandparents were not successful, and maybe there was harsher times for Indian people, then it's really important for educators to understand how to bridge that gap and break some of those cycles, and us partnering together.
Thank you, Paul, for your insight. Fawn, would you like to follow up with that?
I think here for us, it's been really hard to find preschools. There's not many available here. I think as far as our tribe goes, we want to look into opening a center to provide that, because that transition for them going straight into kindergarten, especially, not understanding and not getting, proper testing and stuff done for a lot of our children that do need that, like Susan had said, it's our children are starting behind. And I think making sure that we can get more spots at our local TKs and preschools for our Native students to ensure that they have that support and that family has that support to prepare them better for school.
Thank you, Fawn. Susan, you have some comments on that?
Just adding to what Fawn said and kind of what I said previously, a lot of our children are going to be entering into the TK through 12 system, having not been identified prior by the Child Find system. So you're going to see a lot of our children, because we have the highest rates out of any other ethnicity in the country, of children with IDD. So just know that there's a good chance, our children are coming into your classrooms with something that has not been diagnosed yet. And so, coming alongside the family, coming alongside the tribal social services worker, whoever's there as a support system for that child, and helping to get them connected with the right resources and support services, and helping them really understand, all the different things that the child could benefit from.
Thank you, Susan. And then finally, our last question. And if you have one recommendation to folks on the line with us, and we have education leaders, early childhood providers, and other staff to help them engage in more effective partnership with tribes, what would it be? And if I could ask you to, when you think about that and when you answer that question, can you talk about something that's really actionable, something that that they can, really implement, like tomorrow? What can they do to begin this work with tribes? And let's start with Fawn this time.
I think taking the time to really listen to your community, really hear them, understand them, and show them that you actually are hearing them. Put things into action. If you don't already have a parent committee, start one. And don't let it go months and months before something on their to-do list or their needs gets done. Put into action the things that your community needs and actually listen, learn, and become a part of theirs. We have cultural dances, and we have open ones and we have closed ones. And sometimes, our kids want to invite our teachers and staff of the school, and that's allowable. Just really take time. If we have a lot of events during our summer and we invite our school staff, they're not working, but we are a very small community. We all kind of grew up together here, and we just invite them to be a part of our youth and our culture outside of school to grow closer with our community.
Thank you, Fawn. That's really good. Susan, can I have you comment on that?
Yeah, I think kind of a quick action step would be just to get some of that historical trauma training. It's nice to have just an overall understanding of it, but then also more of a localized understanding of it, because how it affected, it affected different regions, even within the state, differently. Down here in Southern California, they have a lot of the missions here. Up in Northern California, we didn't have that same, it didn't hit us that way, right? And so Fawn's story, like, that resonates with me because it was kind of the same thing up in our neck of the woods in Susanville. So knowing that history is just really, really important, but also realize, even though we're saying history, like, the effects of that are still very much alive. And we talk about it like it trickles down for 7 generations. And so, my family, for example, my grandma was one of the ones who was sent on a train down to Sherman Indian School at the age of 5. She only spoke Maidu at the time, and she wasn't returned to her family until she was 12. She lost her language. Now, even though that was over 100 years ago, you look at her children, right? So my grandma suffered from agoraphobia, and her children, then at that point, that was her first introduction into the education system, was something super traumatic. So she did not impress upon her children the importance of education. So you can see where, a lot of our parents at that point, fall within that category, right? Of like, education is not super important, kind of traumatic, not the best thing. And then now you get to my generation, growing up, even though I'm 2 generations removed from that, I was the first one to go to college in my, in my family. And my grandma saw the value, in her later life, saw the value of education. But I even struggle with a little bit of anxiety, in school. And so, and I relate that back to that historical trauma piece. Growing up on the reservation, growing up, in a more impoverished area, and just knowing that I was different. So even though that it didn't directly happen to me. It happened in my family. And so that has, kind of carried its way. So even though we call it historical trauma, like there still is, rippling effects. I believe that Paul and Fawn would agree that still is very much present with our children today.
Thank you, Susan. Paul, would you like to comment on that?
Sure, thank you. Well, one of the things Tony Thurman mentioned was to increase the number of graduates, Native American graduates, to increase and improve attendance, lessen absenteeism. And I think it starts with decreasing the inordinate amount of suspensions and expulsions. So there's facts. We have data. There's data points that show that tribal children have an inordinate amount of suspensions and expulsions. That's broken down by county. I think it's really important that county administrators and county leadership reverse that. I mean, we can talk about the programming, but I think for there to be an initiative, for there to be a direct, correlation of how we're going to look at those numbers as the responsible educators, I think it's important for that to be mandated, for that to be expected from the state, from it to be reviewed and expected from school districts. And what kind of accommodations can be made? And I remember when our son, got in trouble. He was like, I believe, in second grade, and the teacher was sharing that she could just see it kind of building up. And I asked, and I said, in terms of coping mechanisms, in terms of, self-regulation, what do you do? And, what can we do together? And I said, I'd like to share with you that when our children were born, every morning in the dark, I would go outside and they would be, bundled up, and I'd pray with them. And I knew that I would not be here with them forever. So I was giving them and sharing with them coping mechanisms of feeling the wind, hearing the leaves, experiencing the sunrise. Because when I'm gone, they'll still have this self-regulation and coping mechanisms. They'll still be comforted with, these gifts of life. And so, I share that because I said, can he go outside for a second? Because I always ask, hey, can you go collect yourself? It's not me kicking him out of the house, but it's me helping him. And so it was funny because the teacher said, he asked if he could go outside, and I was like, no. But now that you mentioned that, the next time he does that, we'll see. So about a week later, she called me up and she said, I can't believe it. He asked me, he followed instructions. He did not leave my visual supervision. He went out there, he came back in, and he was able to finish with the class. And it's really important for us to know, what are we doing at home? This is what I mean by relationship, partnership, engagement. What do parents do? What do families do? And it may be traditional, it may be cultural. We put those labels on it, but that's not, it's not for something else. It's everyday life of how we wake up and how we treat one another. So I would share that. Let's go ahead and change the suspensions and expulsions. Let's change the way we respond to our families, one child, one family at a time. Thank you.
Paul, that was very moving. I really appreciate that. I just want to ask really quickly if the panel has any last comments they want to share. That was our last question, but I don't want to take away if you want to share something quickly.
I just want to say, for those that are here listening to us and our stories and, wanting to learn, and just for being here, that's the first step for all educators, is to just show up and listen, and we do have people chatting and, sending questions, and we appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Fawn. Susan, did you want to say something?
Yeah,
Yes,
thank you again for having us, and just coming to this webinar and wanting to engage with us, and just I just want to challenge you to remember how important of a role that you play in our children's lives sometimes you have no idea. Like you can have one experience, right? The child could have one experience, bad experience, or great experience, but every interaction is an opportunity for growth and for healing, within the education system. So it's a great step to build those relationships, and we just thank you for wanting to start to partner with us.
Thank you, Susan. Paul, quickly.
Yes, and again, just thank everybody. I share with our children that we're like rocks being thrown into a still pond. Those rings that resonate. If we share goodness, if we share good intent, how that carries forward, and it carries forward with those that we've touched and beyond, what we may understand. So I would just, thank each and every one of you for participating. Sarah and her leadership, Bree, the California Department of Education, California Department of Social Services. We're very grateful for this opportunity for us to have this sharing. Thank you.
And thank you all. Your comments and your insights were very moving. I appreciate it. Some of the key points that I jotted down when I was listening to you, partnership building, taking time to build relationships, opportunities to share involving the community and families in sharing and coming up with solutions, teach the real history, and using tribes as advocates for students. I would like to read the quote that's on the slide. Let us put our minds together to see what we can build for our children. And I think that we have the capacity and the drive to build wonderful programs for our students. I'd like to thank Sarah for inviting me to be part of this moment. This webinar and this discussion is so valuable and important. It truly shows California's commitment to the Native American community. By working together, we can build bridges that create programs that are culturally appropriate for Native American students and all students. And by participating in this webinar, we are striving to build those connections for communities that are inclusive and respectful. It's important for students to feel like they are seen and they have their culture and history represented. We all have the same goal. We want these programs to be successful and strong and to engage our tribal family voices, and in making sure that tribal children and their families are heard, respected, and valued. I'd like to turn it over to Sarah for the final closing.
Thank you so much, Judy. As you leave us today, we ask that you remember the stories and the messages from our panelists and the 6 principles Nikki shared to consider applying in your work with Indigenous communities, and remember the voices, stories, and messages across all of it. Don't just remember, put them into action, learn, move forward, create these partnerships. So looking at the develop your Indigenous literacy, know the history of your local tribe and their current practices. Reflect on what you and your agency bring to the relationship. Learn, do better, invest for sustaining mutually beneficial and reciprocal relationships. Engage with them, help fund them, become part of the work that they're doing. Honor Indigenous community sovereignty, recognize and integrate their Indigenous expertise, partner with tribal communities to inform systems improvements, and here pulling from our panelists, have tribal parent communities as part of the school. Take time to engage with part of the tribal community's culture and youth outside of school. Look at the data. Act from a restorative justice frame to reduce suspensions, expulsions, and other exclusionary practices that disproportionately affect our tribal students. Engage in the ongoing, meaningful, and critical work. I want to thank the panelists, Susan, Fawn, and Paul. You 3 meant so much to me for joining, and I've learned so much over just tonight. But Paul, I think you and I have been learning together for several years now, and I look forward to the same with Susan and Fawn. Your willingness to join us and give your time and your expertise, your honesty, and to do more in partnership. Thank you, Rhonda, for your slides and your words. I need to thank TSD and the ASL interpreters, Judy for being such a wonderful moderator and a partner with my branch at CDE, Teresa, Bree, and Beth for your countless of hours on working on this and making sure we were good to go. And a special thanks to Stephanie, who has personally helped me in my learning and awareness around tribe sovereignty and partnering better and learning more. She helped me dream this up, the P3 webinar, one late afternoon when we met to discuss what more we could do. And then I met with Paul and then with Season, and it all came together. Quoting from Paul, "Speak from truth, speak from love." Thank you all for being here and all you do to support our children, their families, our schools, and their communities, including our tribal communities. Build bridges, be change agents, move into action. A resource email will come later, but thank you all for tonight.
Thank you, everyone. We see and hear the questions in the chat and Q&A, and we will take these questions back to our team and work on our next step with this feedback from the field and the panelists. Thank you again.